For more on these and other developments in the United States, Sherwin joins us live from New York now. So Sherwin, the beaches, outdoor venues opening in many states, but those pictures said it all around social distancing. I mean, how does this complicate the U.S. response?
Remember, we're in a phased reopening now, Francis, in terms of the ability for people to do what they might have done before this virus struck, like go to the beach or go to certain venues, but having to then practice social distancing, wearing masks. And in those pictures you just saw in that package, you will see a very limited number of masks being worn on the beach. You're just seeing pictures of Osage Beach in Missouri, literally hundreds of people cramped into a confined pool party space, and you don't see any social distancing there at all. And the big concern now from authorities in these various venues, Francis, is communicating with these partygoers to say, you now have to self-quarantine for the next 2 weeks because you've broken every regulation that we had put in place so that we could have afforded you these opportunities. So the big concern here, because the data lags from the actions of humans, is the fact that you might now see a surge in the number of infections, new infections in this country. But of course, that data will only come in the weeks ahead.
This is incredible. Sherwin, what about as these lockdown restrictions are eased? Can you tell us how religious institutions are being dealt with? It's interesting for us because the president tonight talking about that specific issue in South Africa.
Well, the difference, when you make a comparison between the United States and South Africa, Francis, is that the national government in South Africa under President Ramaphosa and the executive have a great deal of authority in terms of opening up certain things in the various provinces. Here, the Constitution affords a great deal of power to the state. So there was an interaction earlier this year between the president talking about how he had the full authority to reopen state economies, and there was quickly a legal and statewide pushback from both Republican and Democratic governors explaining that the federal government doesn't have that sort of power here because the Constitution really does give a great deal of authority and leverage to various state governments here. And so half the states in this country already have opened religious institutions, mosques, synagogues and churches, over half of the United States. But some states like New York and New Jersey, which were historically hotspots in terms of coronavirus in this country, they've been a bit slower to do so. But the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, has issued guidelines, and I think you will hear something similar from President Ramaphosa perhaps when he speaks later today, in terms of some of the regulations, the new normal that these institutions will have to now impose in their venues: social distancing, having limited capacity, maybe 25% or 50% of churches. Don't share a hymn book or don't share your Bible. No collection plates going around the venue. Don't drink from the same cup. Simple things that really are based in science that could be applied here. But as I explained, different measures for different parts of this country, given the power that is given to the states by the Constitution.
All right, so let's look at some of the other issues playing out in the U.S. and you've already mentioned this, that flights from Brazil are being blocked within the last 14 days. Travelers who've gone there can't enter the U.S. This even while those infection rates are incredibly high in the U.S.
So if you're a citizen in Brazil, you'd be allowed to come back. But if you're a foreigner that has been in Brazil for the last 2 weeks, you would certainly have to go into some sort of quarantine before you could travel to the United States. We saw similar measures imposed originally on China, Europe, the United Kingdom, and now Brazil. And I think the irony here is, this President Jair Bolsonaro is someone that really, in many ways, Francis, was trying to emulate Donald Trump in terms of his sort of laissez-faire attitude towards this coronavirus. I think he called it a little flu, urging the country's governors to lift stay-at-home orders when cases numbers were spiraling out of control. So very much an ironic situation here where, sort of trying to play down the real impacts of this virus and seeing a huge surge now in case numbers. You see there's mass graves in Sao Paulo, Brazil, currently at 377,000 cases, 1,042 new cases just today, and a death toll edging towards 24,000.
Sure. So talking about President Donald Trump, some would say he's been a bit reckless, touting, championing hydrochloroquine as a potential treatment. The WHO now saying it'll temporarily halt its global trial of the drug. Just tell us how that links to the president's behavior.
Well, it does speak to kind of what we're seeing in terms of the science. One would assume that the WHO stopping the testing of this drug would be the sort of final nail in the coffin in terms of this ongoing debate where you have the politics on the left and the science on the right. And what we've seen from various studies, and these are now accumulating, including a study published in the Lancet Medical Journal this past Friday, a study that evaluated 96,000 COVID-19 hospitalized patients, Francis, and they find that 45% of those experienced an increased risk of death. The Food and Drug Administration in the United States, the federal agency that approves the usage of drugs in this country, also announcing in April that using the drug outside of a hospital where clinical trial is unacceptable, and also it increased serious heart rhythm problems. So the science, the accumulation of the studies that we are seeing speaks to the fact that this drug is not effective. But of course, you also have the political dynamic of a president that has put his political capital on the efficacy of this drug, and as history has shown us, is refusing to back down from that.
Incredible that he was pushing this when it was unproven and now proved unsafe. Finally, some optimism today, Sherwin. The governor of New York rang the opening bell to celebrate the return of operations to the New York Stock Exchange. That's so iconic. Is there a sense that the worst is over where you are?
Does the smile tell you a story, Francis? Perhaps somewhat. Very much a symbolic message that we got from the governor today, him ringing that bell. Of course, the trading floor is works for television. Sometimes you need a shot that speaks to the markets going up and down. But essentially, traders don't necessarily have to be on a trading floor to trade these days. All you need is a cell phone or an internet connection, and you can do that from anywhere around the world. So this was very much a symbolic message that, New York is sort of turning the corner. Death rates are down in the state, hospitalizations, intubations. So we are seeing slowly, businesses coming back in certain parts of the state, not so much New York City. You can now go and pick up your pre-ordered Starbucks on the sidewalk. You can't go inside, Francis, but we all know how New Yorkers love their coffee.
All right, thank you very much for that update. So an incredible milestone in terms of the numbers, but some easing of restrictions and a sense of something changing, turning in the United States. Sherwin Bryce-Pease live for us.